So today we're going to do a quick animation. I had a question from Will over in the Pixel Geek community on how to recreate this fun little animation. And here we are over in Webflow where I recreated the animation. Let's walk you through how to make this. First step, setting up the structure. So the first thing you want to do is start with a container. You're just going to drag your container in, set it to flex. If it's a blank canvas and you want things a bit more centered, feel free to play with the margin. I kind of just centered it on the page for the tutorial purposes, so you don't really have to pay attention to this particular spacing, but you can certainly use it if you would like. So you need a container set to flex, everything in the center. Then you need a div block. This is going to serve as your interaction point, so you want to be sure that you set up the structure with the container and then a div block. This div I set to 500 by 500, and because it's inside the container set to flex, it's going to be centered on the page. Next, you need a div to hold the line and the text and the block. So I just pulled in a heading, created the line with another div block. I set this to 300 with a height of 5, and then the block is just 30 by 30. This div is also set to flex. I've done left aligned and wrapped it. I did set the width of 400 pixels so that when we do the interaction and we expand the size, we don't have any wrapping of our line and our block. We want all that to be the same, just get a little bit bigger. So that's how you set up the structure. And there are just some really quick steps that we need to take to get the rest of the pieces before we work on animation. So you want to click on your div block and come down to the bottom effects panel. And all we're going to do is add a box shadow. So you want to just click on this box shadow and you'll see there are lots of different angles, distance, blur, and size. Feel free to play around with these to make them what you would like, but this is what I've used for today's tutorial. And that's all you need to do to set up the basic structure before we move on into the animation. So we want this entire section, this entire div block, to get bigger when we click on it, and this little square to rotate. So it expands, changes color, and rotates, and then goes back when we click on it again. So we'll come over to our interactions panel, and we're going to choose an element trigger. Now you can see I've already have the animation done here, but when you first come in, if you don't have any, you would just hit the plus sign. This will give you the options. Now you can use mouse hover for this exact same animation, so the choice is really up to you. You could also do scroll over. All of the same functionality is repeatable across any one of these. I chose the click to tap, so that's what this tutorial does, but again, the same interactions can be used over hover or roll over. So we're going to click on this, and when this comes up, unless you have a bunch of animations like I have, you're going to see a blank slate, and you have two things to do here. So mouse click untap, we're going to start an animation on the first click. So if you have nothing, just hit the little plus sign, and this will give you a new timed animation. Now for us, I already have that, so let's delete that out. And for us, that first one is for it to change colors. So let me walk you through what I did here. The first thing we want to do is set up the initial state. The initial state is so that when we use the second click, we can go back to what it looks like on the home screen, right? We want it to get big when we click on it, and when we click on it again, we want it to shrink back down. So I've set up the initial state with how things appear and are laid out currently on the page. So that means the background color is this dark purple color, and so on and so forth. The important thing to remember when you're setting up animations is that you're using the correct effect. So if that's an element, a class, or the trigger, and that you are looking at the timing in terms of initial state and otherwise. So as I said, I set up the initial state for all of these, and this just saves you a little bit of time as you're working through your animations, and I'll show you how that goes. So the first thing you're going to want to do is hit the plus sign. This will bring up a lot of options, and for this we're working at styling and scaling. So first we'll go through styling. Styling on here is BG color, which is background color. for all of the div blocks, including the line and the block here. And then it would be, of course, text color for the headings. So all of the color works the same. So you click on BG color and you'll get this. It'll come in as no color at all. So you just open your color picker and pick your preset colors or choose whatever you would like. And you're going to want to do that for each element. So as you can see, these are all set to the initial state when you go down through. Now, the scale is another thing we want to adjust. So we want it to get a little bit bigger. We have to set it initially as its current state. So its current state is 1. And I'll show you what we do when we make it a little bit bigger. So you need to set the current state as 1. And then for the block to rotate, we're going to rotate on the Z axis. That is what kind of moves it, not front to back. Those are harder to explain, maybe not for today's tutorial. Trust me, we're going to rotate at 90 degrees, but for this one, just set your Z axis to 0. Once you have all of those set, just copy them all. So hold your shift down if you're on a Mac and click down. And then you're going to right click and hit duplicate. This will move them all down here. So now you have the exact same set of animations, saves you a lot of extra work. Then you just want to go through what the next state is going to be. So this, we want to move the color from purple to a lighter color because remember we swapped our colors. So this is going to be after the previous action. Duration is a second, just a little bit longer. We want this to be a smoother transition and not such a quick transaction. So I made all of these 1 second and used all of the easing as out court. Again, these are all things you can play around with. Pick the timing, duration, and the easing that you prefer, the colors that you prefer. So all of the colors work exactly the same. Again, setting the duration to 1 and the easing to out court. Then we need to scale. So we have to make that box a little bit bigger. Remember, we set it to 1 up here at our initial state. So here we're going to, I used 1.1. You can see that if you go higher than that, it gets pretty aggressive. So play around with them, whatever you would prefer. So I've set all of these to 1.1, again with a duration of 1 and an out court preset. And finally, we have to rotate the block. So we're going to rotate the block 90 degrees. This I left at linear and the duration of only ½ a second. Otherwise, this tends to kind of lag on and takes a long time for it to turn. But feel free to play around with this as well. So as you can see, when you preview it, a lot of things are happening, but they're happening all at once as we wanted. Now we just have to figure out how to get it back to its initial state. No problem. Once you have this initial interaction working, you're going to click the 3 dots and hit duplicate. This will give you a second interaction exactly like the first. And you're going to come down to on second click and pick that interaction. The first thing you're going to want to do is come up and change the name to that. Oops, I don't want to use that one. You're going to want to come up and change the name here because it's going to say color change 2 or whatever you've named it, interaction 2. So give it a more appropriate name. And then you're going to want to come back to your initial state settings. So for you, they're probably at the top and everything after 1 would be deleted. Again, to quickly highlight everything, hit shift and then go to the end. Right click, you can delete or duplicate, whatever you need to do. So in this case, everything after the 1 you would have deleted out and only the initial state settings are left. Now, we can't leave it at the initial state. I know that sounds like it should work, but it doesn't. We have to tell it to actually do something. So we want to be sure that we select all of these and turn off the initial state. That's the first step. Once you've done that, you should then be all ready to go. This is all going to be set to a duration of 1 and out court, and your rotate is now back to 0 with the same settings. And just like that, you have your interactions all done. So you can see you click and they go back. I hope this was a helpful tutorial for you. If you have any other interactions that you want to work on, just drop a note in the comments. Bye.